You just saw the commercial. If you're wondering, what does Adjutant Global do? Well, now you know. They train. So let's welcome up Bob Doherty. He's going to give us a little bit of information about that later on. We'll find out more about what his group does. But welcome to the show, Bob.
Hey, Carlos. Thanks for having me again.
So there's so much going on in the Middle East, I don't even know where to start. So how about you take us what's going on right now that you think is really a problem?
Well, yeah, it's probably an area that's, as in much turmoil as it's ever been, and that's saying a lot since we've always seemed to have issues and problems in the Middle East. It's never really been stable for the last couple hundred years. So right now it seems to be incredibly chaotic, and I know it's real hard to understand, and it's actually a lot of complex issues and relationships going on. So I don't blame people for being frustrated and a little worried about the whole situation. Really, to me, one of the main items that should cause us concern here in the U.S. and the West is obviously been the rise of the Islamic State. Whether you call them ISIL or ISIS or the Islamic State, just an evolution of the name. These guys really kind of burst on the scene a couple of years ago and have really kind of dominated the Middle East in terms of the publicity they're getting and their actions. They're obviously a very brutal, very barbaric combination insurgency terrorist and nation-building group. And they've actually seized large chunks of territory in Iraq and Syria, which they're actually governing. So they're a lot different animal, a lot different type of organization than we've ever seen before, even when compared to Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda and its various elements in North Africa or Afghanistan or Pakistan or the Arabian Gulf. Al-Qaeda never really seized land and was able to control it, certainly for not long periods of time. With the Islamic State, we have a group that is trying to build a nation state. So they're doing the things in the territories that they've captured. They're taking out the trash. They're making sure the lights are on. They're making sure there's food in grocery stores. They're doing the things to try to govern what they would call as a country. Obviously, we wouldn't call it that. So it challenges us with a type of group that has a capability and resources that we've never seen before. Then along with that, obviously, they're trying to export their revolution, their caliphate, as they were, which is basically the return to an Islamic empire ruled by one leader, and they're trying to do that very violently. So it's really a dangerous entity. It's kind of a threat that the U.S. hasn't really faced before in this type of form. We have certainly seen some horrific attacks lately, the Paris attacks, obviously, and then the ones right here in California in San Bernardino, certainly inspired by the Islamic State, it looks like, and multiple other attacks around the world. So they're showing their ability to not only cause problems in Iraq and Syria and the Middle East, but also to project their power around the world, which again is a sign of an organization that has significant capabilities and resources.
Let me ask you.
To me, the Islamic State represents probably one of our biggest problems and threats in the Middle East.
Let me ask you this question. I think it was Stanley McChrystal wrote a book. I don't know if you read it, Team of Teams.
Right.
And he was talking about how this is really a different kind of a military strategy that is needed for these guys because they work more as a network instead of a linear fashion that they're used to, right? They used to go to the country, the ships would line up, the soldiers would line up. These guys don't work that way. It's more of a network. It's very complicated. It's like a spider web, and it's really hard for them to pinpoint it down. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. And McChrystal was one of the most effective commanders we have. It's really a shame that he's no longer, within the military system. He understood, and what he understood, Carlos, is what works, which is combining good, and I emphasize good, accurate human intelligence with surgical, special forces, special operations capability. And if you really look at the predecessor to the Islamic State was Abu Musab al-Zarqawi's Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And if you remember in 2005, 2006, they were causing a lot of problems in Iraq in the Middle East. The way that organization was beat, the way the predecessor organization to the Islamic State was beat, was exactly what I just said. Very good human intelligence, tactical intelligence, strategic intelligence, pinpointing where the network was, who they were, how they were moving money, how they were moving weapons, and then a high frequency of daily and nightly special operations raids, going out and capturing these guys, killing these guys, and destroying the network. And in about a year of that sort of joint operation, Al-Qaeda in Iraq basically ceased to exist. So can we duplicate that same thing against the Islamic State? Do we have the will to do that, the political will? Unknown at this point, in my view. Do we have the military capability? Absolutely, we do. We've done it before. Do we want to do that? I don't know. Again, that's a decision to be made in Washington. But McChrystal is exactly right in that it's a network. You have to attack the network and a cell structure a lot different than you attack a traditional enemy.
Yeah, so it was a fascinating book, fascinating read for people who want to get a better understanding. I mean, it's a lot of strategy involved, so I don't want to deceive you on that. But another question for you about a lot of things we don't get in the normal media is the involvement of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, some of these other Arab countries, if I'm correct, are funding this group as well. Can you elaborate a little bit about that, and is there something we can do about it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're funding them. Look, this is where the complexity comes in, right? So historically, I'm talking before 9/11, different elements of the Saudi government or wealthy Saudis or wealthy Gulf Arabs were funding these Sunni conservative religious movements. Some would call them Wahhabis, some would call them Salafists, that morphed into Al-Qaeda and Sunni extremist and terrorist groups. So that was going on. And then the Saudis and the other Gulf Arabs realized that kind of the monster had gotten out of the cage, and when Al-Qaeda actually staged attacks inside Saudi Arabia in 2003, it was kind of a wake-up call to all those monarchies in the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia, like, we've helped spawn a monster that we can no longer control. And they really started cracking down on Al-Qaeda and the Sunni extremist groups. So it's not that I'm worried now that the Saudi government is funding ISIS. There may be individual wealthy Saudis or other Gulf Arabs from around the world that are helping fund these guys because they themselves are extremists. It's not done at a government level. What's worrisome now is we've got this group that has their own money, that has plenty of funding. They don't need funding from anybody else. They're selling oil on the black market every day. They've actually captured large amounts of cash. They've actually, they engage in antiquities trade. They engage in taxing people that are in lands. So they got plenty of financial resources. What the Saudis are faced with now is we've got the Sunni extremist group that may threaten our own regime because the Islamic State is no lover of the Saudi royal family. And so how do we help control this group? And then the other complexity is obviously the Islamic State, which is a Sunni extremist group, as part of their radical ideology, they also believe that Shias, the other sectanism, the other main sectanism, are apostates as well as Jews and Christians. So they have no problem killing other Muslim Shias as well as Jews and Christians and atheists. So you have the government of Iran, which is Shia dominated, kind of fighting against the Islamic State. And you have the Saudis, who are Sunnis, kind of not wanting the Islamic State around, but it serves as a nice counterweight to the Iranian government because the Saudis and the Iranians hate each other. And that's that kind of Sunni Shia divide there. So again, there's layers and layers of complexity in here, and who's your friend, who's your enemy, who's your friend for today, but maybe your enemy tomorrow. And it's, again, a very complex situation. I don't know if there's any real solution out of all this chaos that's happening right now, unfortunately.
I feel like we need Mike Ditka with a little chalkboard or Jim Madden just to be able to draw this whole thing out. On the Saudi Arabia,
That's true.
Yeah, it's amazing how complex it is. On the Saudi Arabia, would it be fair to say that Saudi Arabia and Iran are fighting proxy wars against each other in Yemen and in Syria and all those places?
Absolutely. You have actually Saudi ground troops fighting in Yemen. You have the Saudis fighting in Yemen against the Yemen Houthi rebels, the Yemen Houthi Shias who now control Yemen, who are financed and supplied by the government of Iran. So absolutely they're fighting a proxy war in Yemen. In Syria, we see the same thing. We see the Iranian government, through their Special Operations Forces, their Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, their Quds Force, which are their equivalent to our special forces, helping prop up the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and the Saudis actively funding the Syrian opposition movement. So, yeah, they're fighting a proxy war in Syria. They're fighting a proxy war in Yemen. They really do not like each other. They're kind of the two most powerful countries in that region. And again, it goes along the Sunni Shia split. It goes along an ideological split. And I think that's going to continue for a long time, unfortunately.
Do you think the problem right now between Iran and Saudi, is that going to destabilize the Middle East at all, or is it just a lot of barking back and forth?
Well, I think it's already destabilized the Middle East. If you look at Yemen, Yemen is a totally, destabilized country. Syria is in total chaos in the middle of a civil war. You've got the monarchies in the Gulf, Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates. They're worried about the Iranian influence, and some of those countries have majority Shia populations that the government of Iran is covertly funding in their opposition movement. So you've got a real mess that the Sunni royal families, Saudi Arabia and the other monarchies in the Gulf, are very, very worried about their future power and stability with an Iranian government that is very aggressively exporting their Shia revolution to Shia populations around the Gulf. So it's already destabilized, and I think that will continue for at least the short term.
It's fascinating. I know we've got a couple minutes before we take our commercial break. This is Bob Doherty, VP of the Adjutant Global Group. You can find them at Adjutant Global, correct, Bob?
Yeah, www.adjutantglobal.com.
There you go. Bob, here's another question for you in regards to the Iran situation. It seems to me lately, in the last few months, Iran's really moving here. They're developing relationships with Russia, relationships with Syria, a lot closer, at least a lot more visibly in the American media. Is this anything to do with the deal that we made with them, with the upcoming monies? They're supposed to be arriving, I think, within the next year. Maybe relieving of the sanctions. They're also doing a lot of weird things, like the little missile launch, I think, that they did, missing the ship. Continuing on with the nuclear program. What's going on? Did that have any impact here with Iran's weird responses in the last few weeks?
Well, absolutely, Carlos. And actually, I wrote a short blog of it on my LinkedIn profile under my name. And here's what I said. I said the Iranian nuclear deal, if implemented fully, will probably be one of the worst foreign policy deals that our country, the U.S., has ever made.
Wow.
And I kind of harkened it back to Neville Chamberlain's Peace in Our Time with Hitler in 1937 in Germany. They got everything they wanted, Carlos. We relaxed the economic sanctions on them, which were really having an effect on the leadership. We are releasing hundreds of millions of dollars in funding and frozen funds to them. Now, here's what they're going to do with the money. Some of it they'll use to put price subsidies for their people on basic goods to kind of improve the standard of living, but really to give the people a break on price and make them like the regime more. A lot's going to go into the pockets of the regime in Tehran, into their private bank account, and a large majority will be used to fund the export of their revolution through their Islamic Revolutionary Guard force, Quds force in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and help continue to fund direct and indirect attacks that lead to the deaths of Americans. So it's like one of the worst deals I've ever seen. We're actually giving them money that we control that's going to be used, I guarantee you, in the future and lead to the deaths of Americans. It's one of the most crazy things I've ever heard. And by the way, our whole goal with this deal was to get them to stop their nuclear weapon program. That's not going to happen. They're masters of illusion. They're masters of deception. They will continue to covertly pursue a nuclear weapon. That is not going to stop. So it's really a deal that does nothing good for the U.S. and everything good for Iran. And obviously, since they convinced us to do this deal, they feel empowered now. They feel aggressive. There's nothing put in their way to stop them. And they're just going to kind of run roughshod, in my mind, throughout the Persian Gulf and export the revolution and extend their sphere of influence and power as much as they can because they feel nothing is stepping in their way.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue this conversation. I'm also going to ask Bob, of course, the inevitable question everybody has to get on foreign policy. How does Trump affect everything here? So we'll find out more about Trump, and we'll catch you right after this break. Therapy Cable Live with Bob Doherty, former CIA operative specializing in the Middle East, also the VP of Adjutant Global. So, Bob, we were talking about the Iran deal a minute ago, and I want to bring up the Trump, because the Donald, I guess actually not the Trump, the Donald mentions how bad this deal was, and from your comments earlier, it seems like this was really a bad deal.
Yeah, I would totally agree with him on that issue. Again, one of the worst foreign policy deals I've seen in a long time. I can find nothing that we in the U.S. gain from this deal, and I can find everything that the Iranians achieve all of their objectives. And in one of the training classes that we give for law enforcement and military special operations on Iran, we talk about how they're masters at playing three-dimensional chess. And they're really good at that. They're really good at seeing a year and 5 years and 10 years down the road and moving on multiple levels, while we in the West generally tend to play checkers on one plane. And they definitely checkmated us on this one. On this deal, they got everything they wanted. We are going to get nothing that we want. And we may actually help them export the revolution and kill Americans indirectly or directly in the future. So I agree with Mr. Trump on this one issue.
Let me ask you this question, and it's all speculation, of course. Why do you think the administration did this?
This is pure speculation on my part. I have no insight. I think they wanted a foreign policy success, and this is one they could get. The Iranians understood that. The Iranians are very sharp. These are not stupid people we are dealing with, okay? They understood that the administration wanted a foreign policy success, and they used that to manipulate the administration into this horrible deal.
Yeah, it really sounds like that's what's happening right now. Like I said, I mean, the last few weeks you saw this explosion of activity coming from them, as well as Russia. Russia is starting to communicate with China, not China, India, starting to communicate with other countries. I think Iran, you can tell me if I'm correct or not on this, I think Iran was actually communicating with Spain. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, and they're very active in South America, for example, in Venezuela. They've had a long-term relationship there, a burgeoning relationship there. And it's because, Carlos, quite frankly, I thought that the upper levels of the Iranian regime, they now know that the U.S. is not going to check them, is not going to counter them pretty much anywhere in the world. So in the same way I think that Putin and Russia views us. So if you now no longer have the major superpower in the world willing to check what you're doing, you're going to go full speed and be very aggressive in promoting your agenda around the world. And I quite frankly think it's a huge disfavor to this country. We tend not to think of beyond our shores, and I understand that we want to take care of business in our country. But all these things that are happening overseas, because now it's a transnational global community with the internet and interconnectivity and commerce and the speed of communications, all these things that are happening in other countries, they're going to affect us in one way or the other. And I don't see too many good things happening right now overseas in terms of the United States of America.
Yeah, economically, it's going to hurt us as well. And it's actually kind of an interesting comment you made. I might drag you into an area here, but the refugees, from a security point of view, what would you think about bringing the refugees over here? And I want you to think of it as a security point of view, not as a humanitarian point of view or political point of view. But is it a smart move to bring them over here with a security point of view?
No, I mean, you got to then invalidate everyone, right? This is a country that was built on democratic principles, freedom and liberty. We understand that. We are a nation of immigrants, except for the Native Americans, okay? That's the lifeblood of this country. You can never cut off that lifeblood of new immigrants coming in and adding to the diversity and entrepreneurial spirit of this country. I would never want to do that. At the same time, you just can't open the gates and welcome everyone in, because some of these sophisticated enemies of ours, including the Islamic State, have figured out that they can send people into our homeland by using channels such as this, refugee channels. So we have to put the proper safeguards in place to try to prevent that from happening. Now, does that mean absolutely no immigrants or refugees come in here at all? No, I don't think that's a solution. That's not the way we do business here in America. That's not who we are as a people. But does that mean, on the other hand, that you let everybody in? No, there's got to be a medium ground where you can do substantive, real checks on these people before you allow them in the country, and not just ask the question, are you a part of a terrorist group, or do you sympathize with the Islamic State and rely on them to tell the truth? That's just silly.
That is ridiculous. I can't even believe they were doing that. Here's another question for you. Again, we know Trump made the comment, ban all Muslims. He starts elaborating more. He always starts off with a big hyperbolic comment, get everybody's attention, in my personal opinion, from a psychologist, I know what he's doing. He's trying to grab everybody's attention, get the media, everybody focuses on him, and then he elaborates and kind of cleans it up. But when he said banning all the Muslims, and Hillary Clinton came out saying that this could be a problem for him, I guess the question for me to you is, would that cause a problem? Or is this something that ISIS or ISIL really wants? Is this Muslim versus America issue?
Of course, and it's actually in their statement. It's actually in some of the doctrine. They want, first of all, ISIS wants to force Muslims all around the world to choose. Either you join us, the Islamic State, the true caliphate, and you subscribe to our ideology and you accept our leadership, or you're an apostate. You're not with us. You're not a true Muslim. They want to force all Muslims to make that choice around the world. Of course, that's not going to work. Then, as an addendum to that strategy, they want to force Western countries to start discriminating or discriminate more against Muslim populations within their countries to force those Muslims to make the choice towards ISIS. So you're exactly right. The more ISIS can cause friction between existing ethnic Muslim communities in the West and around the world, that serves their interest in their doctrine. So we got to be really careful about that in the West and the U.S. and making sure that we have good relationships. We integrate all minorities and all religions into our country, not just Muslims. That's one of the best things we can do to prevent some of the spread of this radical ideology. And when you really think about it, San Bernardino notwithstanding, we've had a lot fewer planned attacks and actual attacks by Islamic extremists in this country than say Europe. And one of the reasons for that, Carlos, is we do a much better job of integrating immigrants from all backgrounds and religions into this country than Europe does, quite frankly. So we have to keep doing that and keep doing it better. No, we can't ban all Muslims. That's not who we are as America. Yet again, the other extremists, you can't just let everybody in without checking who they are. My whole philosophy is, you want to be a part of this country? I don't care what color you are. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care where you came from, what language you speak. You want to come and be a part of this great country of America where all of us are basically immigrants? Come and be a part of it and obey the laws and participate and work hard and be a part of the society. I welcome you with open arms. I give you the shirt off my back. But if you want to come here to destroy us and what we stand for, then I don't want you in my country. And that's just common sense, and I think it's very plain and simple.
Absolutely. Bob, I don't want to deprive you. We got about a minute left. I want you to tell us what the Adjutant Global Group is all about.
Yeah, Carlos, we really kind of say we're intelligence-based strategic consulting. So we use our human intelligence skills and our knowledge of what's going on around the world to help corporations, to help the private sector, to help individuals with any of their problems on a consulting basis. We also do training. We do training for law enforcement. We do training for the military, special operations element. And we do a lot of training for private corporations and businesses who are either have facilities overseas or sending their people overseas and basically teach them how to be safe, how to be low profile, and how to succeed and be effective with what they're doing. So that's kind of what we do. It's an intelligence-based strategic consulting.
Sounds great to me. People, if you're watching the commercials between the breaks, you'll see the Adjutant Global ad. Fabulous group. Call it. Even if it's just for your organization to learn more, you can't learn enough about this situation. It's affecting us all as Americans. Bob Doherty, thank you so much again for being here. We truly appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Carlos. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, we'd love to have you back. We'll talk to you soon, Bob. Be safe.
Thank you.